Welcome to the Accela Civic Innovators podcast, where we showcase civic leaders and public servants that are transforming the way that governments work, one bold question at a time.
I'm Dustin Heisler, president of eRepublic, and today I am thrilled to be joined by an old friend and an amazing CIO that is pushing the envelope of what's possible, Bob Leek, the Chief Information Officer for Clark County, Nevada.
And I'm Noam Reininger, the CEO of Accela. Bob, we are so excited to have you here today. Clark County is one of the largest and most complex counties in the nation. And under your leadership, you've been making some pretty big, bold, and transformational moves.
From unifying departments on a single platform to building a resident-centric portal and even streamlining permits for massive events, Clark County is showing what's possible when innovation meets intentional design.
So in this episode, what we're going to explore is the large investment that Clark County's made of $40 million to unify different departments like land use, the assessor's office, Treasury Department, and what it takes to manage such a complex transformation. And so to get right into the question, so Bob, you have one of the most complex jurisdictions to manage in the nation, a lot of transformation, a lot of different departments that you need to unify, a lot of technology that you need to unify as well. What does it take to get all these departments aligned and to manage such a complex set of technologies across the board?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to kind of share our story today. And so thank you for inviting me to join. We are big and we are complex. 2.3 million people live here. We have 90,000 businesses that are here within the county's borders. And our county is 8,000 square miles. That's the size of New Jersey. For those that are familiar with geographic placement, it makes us about the 11th largest county in the country of the 3,000 counties. And so we have 40 departments, 8,500 employees. And I can keep going just on and on and on, quoting all these statistics. But what you'll find is that we felt that it was really important that before we start talking about all the technology investments and the complexity of how to support all of that, that we start with a unified vision about what Clark County is and what we stand for. And so Together for Better is our new updated motto that came together a couple of years ago. And we center all of our work around 7 strategic priorities. Now, for those that are familiar with that strategic planning process, for an individual like the CIO, this is gold for us to work with, because rather than just invest in anything and invest in solutions that are available because the technology is available, we start with what does that unified sense of the better future state look like? And then what investments can we make in order to get to that end outcome? And the complexity of all of that is we do have some areas that align pretty well. And I know I'll talk through some more details related to that. But by having a strategic intent around making lives better within our communities, aligning around that with some simple frameworks and personas and all the things that have proven to be successful, and bringing all that together to the local county government and working with the city jurisdictions within the county, because the city of Las Vegas is within our county borders, along with North Las Vegas, Henderson, Boulder City, and then about 90 miles northeast of us, Mesquite, to bringing all of that together toward this unified sense of what better could look like. That's where we start. And so we boil all that complexity down into some simple frameworks, and then we go from there.
So as you think about those initial steps, if I want to replicate, all the great things that you're doing in Clark County, what are those first tactical steps as a CIO I should take to move towards that platform, integrated, unified strategy without worrying about becoming too rigid or even, falling into the one size fits all silver bullet for all the fixes? What would you do and what would you advise there?
Yeah, I think as a new CIO, so I've been here 4.5 years, I inherited a really strong team of individuals that the prior leaders here had been putting together. And so a principle of mine is let's keep it simple, right? And so my initial investment in time and energy was around what is our current state? What's our technology stack? What do we own? Where are we happy with that? Where are we unhappy with that? What are the key relationships that we have? If anybody on my team could be in my position, what would you do first? What would you fix, right? And so really making an investment around the current state, but in parallel to that, and not waiting for that to get done, is to talk about what does that compelling, better future state look like? And so if the county's priorities include things like, let's address the homelessness and houselessness issues that we have here, how do we diversify our economy? How do we support the economy that we have? I'm sure that everyone, as soon as they heard Las Vegas, had an image of what it's like to live and work here. And while the service industry and the resort and gaming and entertainment industry is the core, there are other industries that are here and they continue to move here. And so what's that first tactical step? It's to craft some sense of a better future state. And we've done that through some work that we did with a one-page technology strategic plan. And you can see that on our website. You can Google Clark County's technology strategic plan. It's a 3-year plan, and we refresh it every year, that has really simple 3 objectives. How do we provide support to the public? How do we create the capability for all the departments, these 8,500 people organized in 40 departments, to use all this technology to do the services and to provide those services to the public? And then how do we create a great place to work? And so those tactical first steps are to organize oneself into a framework that can then be repeated and used and really provide that buy-in and that impetus on the parts of county staff to say, boy, that sounds like a great future state. I want to be part of that.
So, Bob, there's a lot of juicy excellence here. So one, a common vision, and then I heard a lot of strategic alignment. And I'm curious, as you're thinking about all the departments that you're serving as the CIO, one part of the question is, how did you get them aligned on the same vision and strategy? And as you've connected these departments now with technology, what real world benefits are you getting by having an interconnected stack?
Yeah, for years, the CIO was told, get a seat at the table. And it's because the need for IT to move out of the back office and into the front and be a part of that strategic vision and be a part of that dialogue and discussion. But I think CIOs need to come to that table with a sense of, here's what I think. And I tell people all the time, I learn the scientific method. I have a hypothesis, and then I do a lot of testing. So, the 3-pronged technology strategy that I talked about, I built it together with my team and got some input from the county manager's office and from the elected officials and so forth. But then we just put it together. And I used that for the dialogue with the departments, so that as we went out and met with all the departments, we said, would you have any issue improving what we do to the public, creating a better way for your staff to use technology to deliver services and have a great place to work? And so you can imagine that no one's going to say, oh, no, that's not what I want, right? And so as the CIO coming forward, and it's almost more like a capabilities strategy rather than maybe a traditional strategic plan around technology itself. We should have a great network, or we should do more SaaS or things along those lines. Those are all the hows to do it. But the what to do, improve the lives of people in our community through better public service, better staff, and a great place to work. That was an easy way to bring everybody together around that shared vision. And then by getting the input into what capabilities are needed, that's how we started to fill in the details. And it was both business capabilities. So for instance, as an example, we need to be multimodal. In other words, we need to meet people where they want to be met. And what we've learned is that the greatest generation and the generation before me, they want to be in person. They want to see people across a counter. Okay, then we have to create a capability to do that. But I tell you what, my kids, who are all Gen Z, they never want to go into a building. They want to do everything off of their phone. And so as a CIO, we've got to create these multimodal capabilities. And so it's a back and forth. We went out with a framework and a vision of what could be, got everyone's input, refined that, And now we're in the 4th year of executing on that strategy.
CIO that employs the scientific method. I think, a lot of gold in there. So, you're thinking about things at a totally different scale too, right? Because you think about like the platform approach, and it's not just the day-to-day permitting dynamics, but you've got F1, your Super Bowl, all kinds of different things that you have to prepare for as part of this. How do you think about kind of that platform strategy, the work that you're doing with Acela? Like, how does that scale to this, need that maybe not everyone has to have, but I'm really interested in kind of your viewpoint on that.
Yeah, Dustin, we are a big organization measured by the private sector. We spend around $2.4 billion a year on Clark County services. We collect about $12 billion on behalf of the state and the cities and so forth. And so that is a tremendous amount of activity that comes through the county. And we play a very core and central role here in Southern Nevada because we're 4.5 hours from everybody else, right? It's Salt Lake City, Phoenix, LA, a little longer to get to San Francisco. So we're kind of in an island anyway. And so the opportunity for us to deal with these large events and what comes through this market, and you mentioned Formula One, we had the Super Bowl, but we have over 400 events a year that have more than 5,000 people attending them. We're the conference capital of the world, with no disrespect to places like Orlando and others. And so that size and scale is important for us to just acknowledge. And because of that, and this is not because I don't think there are startups and innovation that's happening with smaller organizations. The fact is that because of our scale, we need scale solutions. And what I see happening in local government, because prior to coming here, I was at Multnomah County in Portland, Oregon for 7 years. So I now have about 10 years of perspective on county government. What I see is a couple of things. One, there is no county app. It hasn't been developed yet. I think there are organizations that are thinking about it. And I'm glad to see the progress and the work that they're doing and coming forward with a real, maybe top to bottom technology stack that someone in my position should think about. But we have to cobble together a set of solutions so that we're meeting the needs of the people that we provide services to. And in most cases, without any competition, right? You can only get a business license from us. You can only get a permit from us. And so without that drive for competition, what's our drive? It really should be satisfaction on the part of those that we deliver services to. And so in the technology world, looking at things that reduce friction, that make it easier to process transactions, to do it on a digital platform, to do it in an accurate way, to do that with respect to privacy and security and all the risks that we operate with from external actors trying to disrupt our services. You pull all of that together, and we really do want to have a platform approach. And so we strategically have made investments in certain platforms that have multiple ways to solve to the needs that we have. But as yet, I have yet to see one platform that does everything. And maybe someone else will figure that out. But for us, it is about bringing platform-based solutions together and then getting really good at integrating them and managing the data. And that in the retail world, back in my older days, the user experience, for us, it's the constituent experience and the business owner experience.
So, Bob, you talked about a unified vision and aligned strategy, both on the business side, but also on the technical side in terms of a heterogeneous environment of interconnected platforms. I'm curious, in such a complex environment, how are you managing success measures and tracking progress?
This is one of my favorite topics recently because it keeps coming up all the time. And so, how do we measure our success? Well, back in the day when I worked for a retail organization, we measured our success by margin. And when I worked for a manufacturing organization, we measured our success by speed to market of the products that we were trying to build. In county government and in any jurisdiction, I think you can get too bogged down in having too many measures of what success looks like. And I'll tell you why in just a second. I'll kind of explain my thinking through this. So in these meetings that I have at least once a year with every department, and some departments more than once a year, I ask them, how do you measure success? And so when the business license organization says we measure success through these 73 different metrics that we've collected over time, I said, well, that sounds great. But if at the end of the day, you had to boil this down to just some simple metrics, what would they be? And we had this rich conversation with the business license director. And over about a 45-minute period, we came down to just two simple metrics. How long does it take to issue a business license? And we issue almost 600 different kinds of business licenses. And then how long does it take at every step in the process? Because issuing a business license to the Las Vegas Raiders is a lot different than issuing a business license to a beauty salon that someone's trying to open as the dream of their family business, right? And so we boiled down success for each department into as simple a set of measures as possible. We collect that and publish it on our internal documentation so that every technology investment we make, we can ask ourselves, take the case of business license, are we making it faster and less cumbersome to go through the whole process? And are we speeding up every step in the process for each of the things that they do? And so those have been wonderful conversations to have with folks. And, you know, I have some interesting conversations. If you ask the coroner, how do they measure success? It's how quickly they can let a family member know what the cause of death might have been for their individuals and their family. But if you ask another organization like, say, juvenile justice, well, how do you measure success? It's not in how well we're taking care of those on parole and probation, but how do we prevent kids from committing crime? That's their measure of success. And so I love talking about this because I think in civic and in public sector, the opportunity to get away from the technology perspective or the technology metrics and really talk about business outcomes or the outcomes that we support is really important. But I do have a scorecard for IT too. And so we have developed some very simple metrics like network uptime and availability, because if no network, no application. And then for our top 50 applications, tracking their uptime and availability, especially our SaaS products. And it's really important that when our network is up, we expect the partners that we have to have their systems up and running, plan downtime and all the disciplines around change management and so forth. We do all of that. But this combination of these success metrics turn into this kind of one-page dashboard that's really meaningful for everyone. Because we have thousands of things we could measure. Let's get to the things that really matter.
I love that contextual kind of KPIs tied to each of the different business functions that you have. So you're spewing gold today, Bob. So this is great. So, you know, as you think about, you know, back to a beauty salon, right, kind of going through the occupational licensing or trying to get a business permit, you know, as you think about all of the other things happening around tech like AI and cybersecurity and accessibility and new ADA standards and all of that other stuff, how does that intersect those lines? Like, how do you think about that kind of intersection point? Where does that fit into your overarching strategy and how you kind of stay customer centric and hit those, you know, very contextual KPIs that are tied to those business outcomes you mentioned?
Yeah, you know, all of us that work in the public sector, we know we probably work in the most highly regulated industry because we have parts and pieces of everything, right? For us, it starts with things like PCI compliance and then HIPAA and CJIS and FERPA. And I could quote all 50 of the different classes of protected data that we have to operate with. And then you have other external standards like ADA compliance that you mentioned, Dustin, and so forth. And so we have to bring all of that into the context that as we make investments, that we acknowledge and lift those up and don't just assume that we're doing it the right way, that we're intentional about those outcomes. If one looks at our strategic plan that I had to turn into the county manager, the first goal in there is zero downtime related to external actors disrupting our services. So zero is a very tough measure to achieve. Right? And we're constantly under pressure. We have hundreds of thousands of daily attacks on our system. But in order to do that, we have to ensure that we have set a goal, zero downtime, and then have we made the investments necessary in order to ensure that we're able to achieve that success. And so cybersecurity, accessibility, and this growing area around AI, I know that in talking with my peers around the country, that all of us are talking about and trying to figure out what is this real impact from AI. And I know that there's federal legislation that's being considered, and then at the state level, and then the local jurisdictional level, there's a group, the AI Foundation, that about 700 of us are a part of, that's working on trying to develop standards related to that. I think that the true not yet known is the impact of AI on all of that work. But we see AI as a how and not a what. So we're not doing AI. We deliver, hundreds of services to the public. How can we apply AI? How can we apply AI? And then how are all of our partners, strategic and otherwise, incorporating AI in order to make the delivery of what we do more successful? And if that means less costly or more productive or easier, whatever the impact on our measures are. So if I go back to my business license example, how long does it take? And then how long does it take at each step? If applying AI improves that, we should consider that as an investment that we make. And we're truly dependent on our partners to also be doing those investments and letting us know what their plans are.
So, Bob, if we go back to where we started, and you talked about the next frontier, which is AI, but you've had experience. You mentioned retail, you mentioned manufacturing. Now you've been in government. You've done some big transformations. What have you learned about the art of the possible of what government services can be with good technology enablement? And if somebody's starting out to think about transformation, where's a good place to start?
Yeah, I think there's some secret sauce in there. And maybe one day I hope to be able to capture it all and write a book or do something along those lines. But I do think there are some principles that one can follow. One is that the future can be better, but you have to be intentional around that. You have to define a future state, and you have to do that together with the people that deliver the services. So, I worked for an organization, and the CIO came out one day and said, "We're an IT company that does this kind of a service." And they weren't. I was part of an IT organization that was trying to enable that service or that capability. So we're not a county government that's an IT company trying to deliver services. So we each have a role to play in this. And I think the CIO's role is one in which being very intentional about a better future state, and then applying some resilience related to that, because many governments tend to find themselves either stuck in a status quo, or the level of investments that are needed are, they're tremendous. Technology is not getting cheaper. Technology is getting more expensive. And so how do you carve out a larger share of the available funds so that you can apply technology for those better service outcomes? Then you need some kind of a governance structure. You need some ability to prioritize the must-dos from the nice-to-haves from the not-nows. I have never encountered an idea that wasn't a good idea. Most of the time, it's not the right idea at this time. It's something that we can take on at some point in the future. And so that's that seat at the table role that a CIO really can have and really deserves to have in the modern sense. And I think in government, I've been quoted as saying, there is no better time to be in government as a technology leader, because finally, the availability of technology and applying it to the services that we provide, it's there. And the options that are available and kind of weaving that together into a technology stack and having an architecture. And, I'm not saying that you should be a Microsoft shop or a Google shop or anything along those lines. Decide who you're going to be, and then get really good at being that. One is not necessarily better than the other. It's the right one for your organization. So that's kind of how I navigate my way through the question that you asked.
Bob, thank you so much. That brings us to the end of our episode. You talked about vision, strategy, aligning governance, aligning different departments, and you are executing in a very, very complex environment. I think there's a tremendous amount to unpack and learn from you in this episode. I really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
It's always inspiring to hear from leaders like you, Bob. I think we've learned a lot today. The scientific method applied to CIOing. I love, contextual KPIs that are tied to business outcomes, but at each stage of the journey. So I think you had a lot of good nuggets in there that will be helpful for organizations of all size. And, you have to scale to huge needs, but I think the lessons that we can extract today apply to everybody.
And for all you listeners, I hope you found the conversation valuable and helpful today. Please subscribe and share the podcast with your network.
And for more episodes, show notes, and resources, be sure to visit acela.com/podcast.
Thank you all for listening. We're going to see you next time.